Behavioral Health Subcommittee, and we've invited the folks from the Enhanced Crisis Intervention Team, ECIT, to come and give us some education on how their system works and pretty much what a day in their life looks like, so we can kind of get a better understanding of what everyone goes through. So my name is Amy Anderson. I'm the chair. Welcome. Thank you. We're going to do introductions. Judith?
Call on people. Casey?
Good evening. My name is Casey Hetman. I'm a lieutenant with the Police Bureau, and I currently supervise the Behavioral Health Unit, and I also happen to supervise the Crisis Negotiation Team as well. Happy to be here.
Chase?
Hey, my name's Chase Bryson. I work in BHU as the Crisis Intervention Team Coordinator. So part of my purview is kind of helping facilitate training for ECIT and the program, and if they have issues or anything with the program that they like or I can try to help with, I try to do that from within BHU.
Thanks, Chase. Zachary?
I'm Zachary Nell, patrol officer with Portland. I'm also an ECIT certified officer, and I've been ECIT for probably about, I'd say maybe around 4 years, give or take.
Thank you for being here. Benson?
Good evening. I said afternoon. I don't know what that whatever it is. Good, whatever we are at right now. I'm a sergeant up at the Behavioral Health Unit. My direct duties are to oversee our Behavioral Health Response Team, so the officers and clinician pairs. Before I was promoted to sergeant, I was an ECIT officer, so responding to those calls. And then also I am on the Crisis Negotiation Team as one of the negotiators for that.
Great. Yolanda?
Hi, good evening. My name is Yolanda Salguero, and I'm new to the Behavioral Health Committee. I kind of was with the Youth Subcommittee first, and so I just transitioned. Thank you.
Mary Claire?
Hi there. Oh, yeah, it is. Hi there. I'm Mary Claire Buckley. I work for the Portland Police Bureau as the Inspector General and overseeing DOJ compliance, or the Bureau's compliance with the DOJ settlement agreement.
Great. Rochelle?
Hi, my name's Rochelle. I'm a psychologist, a former member of the Citizen Review Committee, a former member of the COAB, and a current member of the Mental Health Alliance.
Great. Glad you're here. Trudy? Hi, Trudy. Your microphone's off, but we can't hear you. Okay, maybe while Trudy's working on that, Barb, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Barb Rainish, and I am a consumer and advocate and member of this work group, although I am not a member of the actual PCCEP.
Thanks. And Jared, did I call on you yet?
I don't think so. I'm happy to be here. Jared Hager with the Department of Justice. I'm here observing in my role as the monitor of the settlement agreement.
Claudia?
Hi everyone, my name is Claudia and I am the project assistant for PCCEP. Thank you guys for being here this evening.
And I'm Judith Mowry. I'm with the Office of Equity and Human Rights and part of the staff, part-time staff for the committee for PCCEP. And I'm just going to help Amy by calling on people. If you can use the raise hand function, that's great. And otherwise, we'll figure it out. Thanks.
Yeah, we also want to bring up PCCEP's mission statement. We got to do our housekeeping. I kind of got ahead of everything. So Do you want to just go over what our mission statement is real quick?
I'm sorry, Claudia, do you have that?
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen with everyone.
Thanks.
No problem. So let's go ahead and finally say the mission statement. So the mission of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing is to work with the mayor/police commissioner, Portland Police Bureau, and Portland's diverse sorry, I can't pronounce that word.
Constituencies.
Constituency.
Yeah, it's okay.
To solicitate and exchange information between the community and the Portland Police Bureau to achieve the desired outcomes of equitable policing, which exceeds constitutional requirements and meaningful community engagement with and trust in PPP.
Thank you.
No problem.
Well, next on the agenda was something called an icebreaker. And I was kind of thinking that for us that really don't know what all you gentlemen really do in a day, my question to you would be, what is the best part of your job that you enjoy? What do you enjoy the most about your job? And you can go one by one and kind of let us know what, this is hard work. And being in the industry myself, I know there's a lot of things that, drive people to do this work, but I'm kind of curious to hear from y'all as to what makes you the happiest doing your work with the BHU. Casey, you can start if you want.
Lucky me. I've been up at the BHU now for just over 2 years, and it's been a unique experience in seeing behind the curtain, so to speak, and in a sad way, really seeing how broken and disjointed the mental health system really truly is. And I've been fortunate enough in my life to not really been affected personally by mental illness. I've had some loved ones that have struggled here and there, but having a real front row seat to folks that are just really struggling, and the sad state of our society, and that the police become the first responders to what's really a health, a medical issue, and that's kind of where we're at. I'm encouraged at the folks that I work with within BHU and then throughout the Police Bureau, and that we've taken that responsibility and run with it, and really tried to seek better training and really fill some big shoes in trying to best help individuals that are experiencing mental health crises and mental illness. So I think what brings me joy and what keeps me coming to work each day are those small victories when we can actually make a meaningful impact, when we've worked with somebody for whether it be days, weeks, or months, and just seeing the relief on their face or their family's face when they've been turned away or fallen through every crack there really is, and that we're actually making a meaningful difference for them, and hopefully making their lives better and more livable with what's going on with them. So that's kind of what keeps me going, and the fact that I work with some really amazing human beings that I haven't had an opportunity to work with in other areas in my past careers or past jobs. So that's all I got.
That's a lot. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Okay.
For the next rule, we don't let Casey go first because no one can do anywhere as well as he did. So
No, it's personal. It's
exactly.
not over one.
So for me, I think what keeps me going each day is that it's constantly different. It's always, I'm not doing the same repetitive work over and over and over again. And so it's, I get to work with people that are looking for inventive solutions and problem solving situations that are difficult. And so that's kind of what is, as Casey said, brings me joy, is being able to work through those different types of solutions and problem solve a difficult thing. And it's not the same monotonous work over and over and over again.
Thank you.
I'll go next.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, before I was the CIT coordinator, I was one of our BHRT teams, and for what, two and a half years, almost 3 years. And for me, it kind of mirrors Casey's in the sense of seeing people struggle. Even sometimes people have no desire for help, and getting to try to help them and meet them where they're at and just do what you can for those people, whatever that looks like. But then also seeing people who really want help, or families that really want help, that feel like there's nowhere to go to get it, and that no one really has their backs, and being able to be the people that come in and, we don't promise them we can fix it, but I say I will do everything within my power to help you, and then doing that. And a lot of times it doesn't make obviously people generally are not like, after they work with us, magically better and go on and never have an issue again. People struggle off and on, but just being able to come beside them and make their life a little better, even if it's for a week or a month or however long. And then for me, sometimes with clients, we don't see tons of successes, but getting to come alongside families that struggle and families that, really care for their loved one and are just watching them, hit roadblock after roadblock, and getting to kind of be an ally to them. And even again, like I said, obviously we can't fix a lot of the issues that are out there, but just being able to talk to them, hear their concerns, empathize with them. And then, like I said, just do whatever we can to help them through that. Even if it's just telling them the truth, like, hey, this is what's realistic here. To me, that's when I truly realize like the importance of what we do, and kind of those ones kind of keep you going amidst all the struggle and failure.
Thank you. Zach?
Well, I'll try to follow up everybody else because I'm just kind of a hodgepodge of all that, I suppose. At least just to kind of start, I mean, I kind of became an officer because I'll be very blunt. I grew up watching Miami Vice, the A-Team, all the cool stuff. Cops are very cool growing up, right? Grew up as a 90s kid. What I didn't realize when I actually started this job and I put some more years on was I personally, for me, I am much better at solving problems using my gift of gab, if anything. And I realized there's actually a very legitimate path for that.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that's been great about Portland is I always say how progressive Portland is in terms of how we do policing and how far ahead we are, I feel like, in terms of how we handle situations compared to a lot of places around the country. And knowing that Portland, the Bureau embraces the ability to solve problems, kind of like Benson was saying, using different problem solving skills. I like being able to come to work and knowing now that, with all the skills I've kind of built up, that I'm able to help fellow officers, but also specifically helping members of the community and their family members. I think that's what kind of really drives me, is coming across someone who's in like a mental health crisis or suffering from a mental health diagnosis, and then seeing the effect that has on the family members. Anytime I hear like, wow, thank you for that, or I appreciate that, and trying to be as blunt as possible, like, I know, like, I just showed up, I can't fix this problem, I know this is going to be really tough for you, but at least just kind of giving people, either changing the perspective on what police actually do and what we're capable of, and then being able to kind of get rid of that perception of what police officers are supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. I feel like BHU and the mental health aspect of it has really kind of I hope change that perspective on what we're actually capable of doing.
Awesome, thank you. And just so you all know, I spend all day working in a forensic peer specialist role, working with these very clients that y'all are talking about. So I'm totally familiar with what everyone is saying. And yeah, the passion that drives me to work is looking for solutions. So I'm with everyone here. So that's why I wanted everyone to have more education and to get to know you all so we could start developing better relationships as part of the settlement agreement. So on that note, we're going to now have a presentation from the ECIT team. And who's going to lead that? Who's headed up?
I don't know that we actually have a firm like presentation. I can cover the nuts and bolts if you want about the program structure and whatnot, but I think we kind of envision this as being more of a chance for Zach and some of us that have worked as ECIT just to kind of talk through what it looks like, and then kind
Excellent.
of more
Excellent.
informal and field
Yeah,
questions or concerns and stuff like that. So
that's great. I never know
so
by the word on the page what exactly it means, so we're open for everything. So thank you for clarifying
perfect.
that.
And this is your guys' meeting, so whatever works best for you, we're here to help you guys learn what you're hoping to learn. So if we're going down a rabbit hole that's not beneficial, stop us and we'll realign. So just to reiterate and kind of maybe refresh people's memory about what our ECIT program is, it's the Enhanced Crisis Intervention Team. It's about 153 officers within the Portland Police Bureau that receive specialized training in crisis intervention techniques and skills. And so some people aren't aware that every Portland police officer has 40 hours of the basic CIT training, the crisis intervention team training, which is somewhat unique to Portland, although some agencies around the country are going to that model where all members of those agencies are getting that training. It's a training that was developed in the early 90s in Memphis, Tennessee. And we've kind of taken that and run with it and kind of made a little bit of change in their programming, and that we, like I said, have all of our officers trained in that 40 hours. And that training curriculum really entails signs and symptoms of mental illness, communication skills, resource skills, and they often include having a panel of folks, of consumers and family members, and better understanding what interactions look like, maybe when they haven't gone very well, and maybe what an ideal would look like, and how we could strive to have those interactions be better. And so we identify officers, they're volunteers that want to receive that enhanced training. It's an additional 40 hours. So at the end of that course, the end of that certification course, they end up having at least 80 hours of crisis intervention team training. And we were kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. Judith was asking about the differences between like the negotiating team and ECIT. One of the big chunks of curriculum within our ECIT, the enhanced program, is actually a block of instructions from our negotiating team on crisis communication skills, because it's so valuable and officers are relying on it so frequently. So the ECIT program's been around since I think 2013, and it's been, I would say, a great success. And we have a number of agencies from around the country that actually look to Portland and inquire about the programs that we're doing and how successful they've been. So with that, maybe I'll toss it over to Zach or Chase or Benson if you want to talk more about what it kind of looks like in practice, if you want.
If you guys don't mind, I can kind of chime in on that, since I'll be honest, I'm still on the streets. You guys are not as frequent.
I want to say something first.
Mhm.
I just want to say, don't use the ones that are already in your newsletter that just came out or that we just got, those examples, because we've already seen them in print and I want to send them to people.
Uh, So day to day for ECIT, just like Casey was saying, I've been through the additional hours of training, and if feasible, we try to do an in-service once a year as well, just to kind of refresh skills, learn, kind of get an update on any kinds of changes we've had in terms of maybe communication skills or DOJ changes, things of that nature. But day to day, I'm a patrol officer. I still have an area of responsibility. I still take calls, do everything that's, my normal responsibilities. But in terms of depending on what was I going to say, the type of call we might get, generally maybe someone in a crisis, mental health crisis, someone who may be having suicidal thoughts. There might be a weapon involved, things of that nature. Generally, dispatch will also send an ECIT officer for that additional training that I've received, just to pretty much really help with, our primary goal as ECIT is to de-escalate a situation for the safety of ourselves, for the safety of the people that we are involved, that they're responding to. So we try to take that communication skill first and foremost before we have to use any kind of force. If I can come to a call and I can solve that call, if it's a crisis in any form or fashion, if I can solve it without any force necessary, that's a win in my book. Those are like some of my favorite calls I could be on. It was like, I'm getting there and this sounds like it's going to be really bad. This might go bad. And by the time we're done, either no one goes to jail, maybe someone goes to the hospital and nobody goes in handcuffs, something of that nature, and no one had to fight, no one got hurt. That's a win. To go from all the way up here and bringing it down is pretty much what the ECIT program is trying to do. We are that first line of defense in terms of de-escalation and trying to avoid any kind of unnecessary violence if necessary, if feasible. So I feel like it's a success. A lot of the officers that I speak to, a lot of the ones that volunteer, feel like they have a pretty natural understanding of communicating with people. It just, when they go through the program, it helps kind of develop those skills a little bit more and learn a handful of new techniques, ways to communicate with people, and kind of open up the doors in terms of how you can, like I said, keep coming to the word de-escalation, but how you can de-escalate and solve a problem with just pretty much just communication.
Yeah, if I can add something real quick. Some of the other, I think, awesome things that our ECIT officers provide is they obviously learn to communicate, and many of them are already great communicators, but everyone has different skills. We also work a lot on like a coach role. So you're kind of someone with, one person's communicating, the other person is communicating to other officers, communicating to dispatch, listening to the communications, maybe hearing like themes or things that the person's saying that, as you're the person talking, you're just trying to think of what to say sometimes, and you might miss something that the person threw out, or, you're not as aware of the overall themes maybe. So your coach can help you if you get stuck and you're like, I have no clue what to say here. They can kind of like, hey, try this. And then we talk about an intel role. So Zach already mentioned this, but you're gathering information as much as you can about the person, about previous situations. Our officers generally write really good reports. So maybe something like this has happened before. And in it, they're like, hey, this person loves their dog. So maybe that's a hook that we can start to talk to them about their dog that we might not have known prior to that. And we'd get that from intel. And our ECIT officers get some extra training and practice at that. In both CIT and ECIT training, we do a lot of scenario-based training. We throw some really challenging stuff at them, which is awesome. And to get to watch them kind of sometimes struggle through stuff. But obviously, making mistakes in training is what we want. And then I don't know, I feel like I learn the best when I mess something up and then get to be frustrated at myself about it and work to not do it again. And that we kind of try to work that into all of our trainings, is quite a bit of scenario training.
And if I can add, I don't know if talking about how an ECIT officer gets to a call or how that process happens. So basically a call goes into our 911 system, BOEC. So that happens. And then as the dispatcher who's trained, he or she listens to the call and sees kind of the nature of the call. And if he or she feels that that call can be handled without the police, then they can be transferred over the crisis line, the Multnomah County crisis line, and that call will go straight to them without police ever contacting that individual. If the dispatcher feels that he or she, that the caller is having some sort of issue where the police need to come, well, then they can dispatch a normal patrol officer. And there's criteria that are there in place that the dispatchers follow, that if this call appears to have a mental health nexus and a series of criteria, is armed, is threatening suicide, is escalating, the caller requests an ECIT officer or another officer requests an ECIT officer. If one of those criteria are hit, then the dispatcher will ask for an ECIT officer to go. And so that person, say Zach is on a call, dispatch will say, hey, is there an ECIT officer available for this? And Zach or whoever will volunteer to go to that. So that you can see there's kind of what we call the scaled response model, right? And so we're trying to do the best we can and put the right players in place to solve the call appropriately. And so that's how an ECIT officer would normally get to a call, how that would happen.
And we have ECIT officers kind of deployed across all of our 3 police precincts amongst all of the shifts too. So at any given day or time, we should have at least a couple ECIT officers working in any given precinct. And being that they are normal patrol officers that have additional training, if they're already tied up on a different call, we do have the ability to pull an ECIT officer from a neighboring precinct if need be, and then they can come lend their services across precinct boundaries if need be. That's something that we keep track of each year too, and we're looking to provide a certification course. We typically do one of those once per year, where we'll typically train up 20 to 25 people. And when we're trying to build out that roster of new people, we're looking at ensuring good coverage across all the different precincts and shifts and days of the week and whatnot. So.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I'm thinking if you're up for it, we probably have some questions out here in the community that would like to be asked. I'm going to open the floor for any community member who wants to ask first. We have a raise your hand feature in the program. And if that doesn't work, you can raise your hand, or you can also hit *9, I think, on the cell. Is that right, Barb?
Barb, you're muted still.
I swear y'all need to learn how to read lips. If you're on a phone, then *9 works.
Great. And the raise hand feature is in the participants box, or you can do it on your picture, I believe. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I'll start out then because I have loads, but I'm going to sink it down to like 1. Is there a particular pathway that an individual, 1, would get on within your program, and 2, how long do they stay on file once they're connected with your program? And my scenario is I have some folks who absolutely need to be connected with your teams, and other folks who are connected who want absolutely nothing to do with it. So I'm just kind of curious how some get on and some do not, and they both pretty much have equal needs.
Well, so are you talking about like a BHU caseload or interacting with
Yes,
IT officer?
BHU caseload where someone works with them, like scenario, they somehow are having a psychotic episode on the streets. They're yelling and screaming, maybe jumping into traffic, no weapons. Would ECIT respond is my first question, or would just the police respond first?
Based at first blush, it sounds like that would likely involve an ECIT response just based on the behavior and the risk to themselves, especially if they're jumping into traffic. I would say yes. So there is a differentiation between ECIT and BHU. The teams in BHU, the officer and clinician teams aren't really responding to calls but that are coming from dispatch. Those are ECIT officers at the precinct level. So our ECIT officers aren't really carrying a caseload per se. They're going to a situation and working through it and resolving it at the scene. And if it becomes evident during that encounter that there's more coordination that needs to take place, then the ECIT officer would make a referral to BHU, where it would come to one of the sergeants in BHU for a triage and review to see if it would be assigned to one of our teams. Does that answer your question?
That's awesome. Yes, because I was
Okay.
thinking of clients who have a tendency to repeat. They're, in and out, they're in jail, they're in the hospital, they're back. And I often wonder, who could I call to make it simpler on everybody, kind of thing. That's what I'm kind of looking for, simplicity.
Yeah, so if you ever call dispatch to request assistance for an individual you're trying to help, being that you are aware of ECIT, you can make a specific request for an ECIT officer to respond to the scene and they will send one. That's one of the criteria that the dispatchers use.
Excellent, thank you.
So Yolanda has her hand up, and then we'll have a question from Trudy in the box. She can't make her mic work. So Yolanda, do you want to go?
Sure. Thank you, Judith. I had two questions, so maybe I'll just ask one and then come back to the second one later. So I was wondering, how with the budget cuts, has this affected the ECIT program at all?
I would say no, not directly. Being that their ECIT officers are attached to patrol, no. We have had some retirements this last year, so we did lose 4 people out of the program to retirements. And our patrol ranks are stretched rather thin right now, but that being said, we still have, of those 153, what we would deem operational ECIT officers, we have about 120, 125 of them that we are deemed as folks that are going to be on the front lines taking calls. So the original number, the goal that was within the DOJ settlement agreement was, I think, around 70 or 80. And so we're well above that. And we continue to see very strong interest each year when we do offer a ECIT certification course.
Casey, so Trudy has typed in the chat box, how are dispatchers trained? Do they spend any time being exposed to what the officers are learning? I would think that would help them to quickly determine whether the criteria is met within a call.
I'll take that one. So obviously, BOEC runs kind of their training, so I'm definitely not speaking from an area of expertise here, but they do get CIT training. We participate, and we just did one. One of our other officers in BHU and I helped with one a few months ago. We just have a portion where we talk about ECIT and kind of explain the benefits of using ECIT officers. We go through their dispatch criteria. So the criteria that we've kind of mentioned throughout this is a part of that training. They get an opportunity to ask questions. I mean, almost like this meeting. And then we do scenarios with them where they get to, we kind of pretend being callers with different, challenges in each call, and then they work through and problem solve, and then we on the end we kind of help critique give any suggestions of how they could have done better, talk to them about what they did really well, and reinforce those things. So they get that, and then they do kind of, I think they call them sit-alongs, or where they work with other dispatchers. And I think, kind of just through learning, just like being a police officer, really when you get out on the street with your coach is when you learn the most. So they do some of that. And again, that's without, I definitely don't know all of their training. I only participate in a small portion of it. Did that answer all the parts of the question?
I believe you did.
Yeah, and I'll also add that I know that there's a requirement that dispatchers, I think, go on 1 or potentially 2 ride-alongs with patrol officers each year as well to maintain their certification. So they actually get a front row seat within the patrol car, working alongside an officer to see how some of those calls look from the street as opposed to the dispatch center.
Thank you. Trudy said thank you in the chat box. Barb, I think your hand was up.
Yes, it was. So I'm wondering if you guys do any, oh shoot, the word just left my head. But after an incident happens, do you do a deconstruction on what could have gone better, or basically what could have gone better? Given that there's sometimes that you being ECIT officers, have contact with, the same person over and over.
Yeah, I can speak for that, Barb.
Thank you.
Yeah, pretty often, especially if we have some kind of, it might kind of depend on the, how drastic this, the scene or the situation was in terms of how much we debrief. Usually if it's something rise to the level of like a lot of investment, a lot of resources, things of that nature, like a very tense situation, we tend to have a debrief period where, we will talk about, hey, we could have done this better. Just like you were saying, hey, what could we have done better? I mean, Chase was on that earlier about, we learn the most when we fail, and it's still absolutely true. I mean, we've all have, like, between all of us, we have, decades of experience at this point, and we still make mistakes. We still learn day in, day out from mistakes we've made and how we can do them better. And just like when you said, with like dealing with people, people that we've seen more than one time, oh yeah, hey, by the way, I've come across this gentleman before. This works for him. This doesn't work for him. He doesn't like when we do this. And then we're able to kind of pass that on. And so when we do get those debriefs, where say we had 5 or 6 officers involved in a situation, if we're all around each other and we all share our information or share our observations about what we saw and what occurred, it lets those other officers involved, at least it kind of spreads that message in case one of us shows up with that person again, but nobody else is there. They can at least say, hey, by the way, I was involved with this person before, and then can spread that information that we gathered from that incident. And the other benefit of a debrief or something that is like a deconstruction type thing is it helps the rest of us, the other officers involved, kind of take a deep breath and make sure we check in with ourselves, with each other. Hey, how's everybody doing? That was crazy. That was a very intense call. Are you guys all okay also? Because the way patrol works, we get involved with a call that might be very high intensity, and then we have the rest of our shift to do the rest of our patrol work. So we go peaks and valleys in terms of intensity almost all day sometimes. I mean, for example, I spent 2 hours talking to a gentleman on a bridge at the beginning of my shift, and I have never been so tired in my life. I was completely burnt out. I was exhausted. I just had to I had to shut my eyes for like 10 or 15 minutes just because of how tired I was just with everything going on. And then I still had the whole rest of my day to do that. Like, I still had the rest of my patrol. So that's why those debriefs are so important on so many levels. But to go back to that, yes, we do them frequently just because there's so many different benefits to it.
Well, I'm going to take this time to say that I thank you guys the ECIT officers and the BHU for what you guys have been doing and are doing. I learned about ECIT officers when I was doing things with NAMI, and the idea that if you needed to call the police on, you know, a family member who was in a mental health crisis, ask for an ECIT officer. You know, they're the ones. And then I always, and I'm going to say, I assume your thing ended up well the other day with the bridge. That when I describe the ECIT officers, I'm like, those are the ones that talk people off the bridges. And then I usually add, and we have a lot of bridges and overpasses, because I've heard you guys on the scanner do great things. So I really appreciate when things go well.
Thanks, Barb. I was kind of curious about, given how stressful things are right now in the world, I'm assuming that you're seeing your caseload go up. I mean, you're getting more calls. Is that the case? Do you feel like you're getting more calls, and maybe, I don't know whether you think they're of higher severity, or that is a cute dog, Benson.
Sorry, I'm trying to control him. It's not working.
I would say that we kind of see cycles. It's somewhat cyclical, but I don't think we've really seen any huge significant peaks this year as far as ECIT calls go. I know Barb had sent me an email prior to this meeting inquiring around some of our data points, and I did get some data back. For the year 2020, we had 3,775 ECIT calls. And that's an average about 314 ECIT calls per month. So that's kind of where we're at. So that's on average, what, I guess 10 a day or so. And then another key point we like to highlight is the fact that since 2017, when we started tracking force numbers a little bit differently, our instances of force being use of force on ECIT calls is still hovering around 1% of all ECIT calls have force used. So 99% of calls, ECIT calls, don't have force being utilized, and only about 3% of ECIT calls are actually ending in arrest.
That's great. Thank you. I see Jared's hand up.
Thanks, Judith. You know, I wanted to piggyback on something Barb mentioned. You know, I have the pleasure of being able to report on the city's compliance with the crisis intervention provisions of the settlement agreement. And, you know, I've viewed the BHU and the ECIT officers and the results they get with, you know, very positively, you know, from the training through the execution of the skills on the street. And I was wondering if any of you might speak to how, you know, you might better, you know, announce your success stories. I just see a synergy with, you know, some of the negative views around policing in the wake of the George Floyd murder. And then I contrast that with, you know, the flash alerts that I get, and I want to emphasize to the court and to the public. And I've been very proud to report the excellent results, some of which Lieutenant Hetman just ran through. But how can the Bureau do that better? I don't know if you guys have ideas, but if you do, I would love to hear what you think.
I mean, you guys chime in as well. I'm just kind of going off the cuff at this point, just my personal perspective. I think, I mean, that's a great question, Jared. It's one, especially over this last year, I think a lot of us have really been racking our brain about. What's been frustrating for myself, and I know a lot of other officers I speak to, are with a lot of that happened over this past year, and obviously the social justice movement moving and everything, one thing that got frustrating for me is a lot of the change that people were demanding or asking for from police officers and from, you know, from their police departments. I feel like we were already doing them. We are so ahead of the curve, like I'd mentioned before, of trying to stop incidences from going bad in the first place. And, you know, I don't think we really needed to put that message out there. I felt like we were doing a very good job. We weren't one of these cities that showed up in the spotlight because we weren't doing things well. You know, I still see other agencies around the country that show up more than once a year. That's not a good sign. Portland, if anything, was showing up for good things. I mean, we had the duck crossing thing from years ago. We had the hug from, you know, that traffic officer hugging that child from, like, you know, the Ferguson incident. We've had more positive things in the media, but this year was really difficult to try to, you know, change the look. You know, I think it was just a very hard time for police to be able to put out that positive message, because I've seen, even when we try to put out positive things, there's still going to be people that are very outspoken against us no matter what we do. You know, I'm a sucker for looking at Twitter feeds, and it's a terrible idea because it is just a cesspool sometimes of people that just are negative thoughts. And no matter what good things come out of that, you know, good press, you might say, or just good stories, there are still people that hate that, or they call it propaganda, is what I've heard. We try to do good things, we show good things, and there's still so many people out there that don't believe us. And that's an uphill battle I feel like we've been trying to climb for the last, you know, ever since social media. It's really difficult. I always, a PR firm would be a great idea. People that are very good at getting positive messages out there, that are professionals at getting messages out there, but that's a financial thing, right? That's something that we can't afford. I think that would be helpful. You know, people that are trained to be like, hey, these are really good things that you guys should put out there. This would probably, you know, just like you're saying, the public needs to know about the good things we do. Unfortunately, the good things don't show up in the news either. You know, that's an unfortunate side effect. We have a lot of good stories. I have a lot of great outcomes of when I've been ECIT of like, wow, that ended up really well. That was going to be a lot worse. How do you promote that? The officers showed up. They didn't use force on anybody. Nobody got hurt. The news doesn't want to really cover that very often. It's not flashy when we do a good job. And I think that's just an uphill battle that police are going to face at this point. No news is generally good news, but when it comes to police work, no news is straight up no news when it comes to police work. Wow, that was not a solution at all there.
I really appreciate all of those thoughts. You know, I see some of the outcomes, and I see you saving lives. And that is as simple as I can put it when you have one of these very high risk encounters with an armed subject in a crisis event who has done something illegal, and you got public calling you. I see it no less as a life saved. And I feel all of the, you know, the hurdles that you mentioned. It's something I'm struggling with too.
And can I piggyback off of what Zach said real quick? I think Amy hit it on the head there too earlier when she said building relationships. We can only sell our story so much, but when we come and we talk to each other like this, and you can go out and tell your friends and tell your coworkers like, hey, no, that's not how this was, or that's not how they are. That's really where that opinion will change, because Zach hit it on the head. We're never going to win. I don't feel we're ever going to win the media battle. But when Amy can say, yeah, I know Benson's a good guy. That doesn't sound like, or let me ask what happened, or something like that. That's where we're going to start changing hearts and minds. And I think it's one by one through meetings like this and interactions like this. And
I'm just thinking that you're absolutely right. And even though there's only a couple of us here that don't know your story, some of the stories, could you spend like 5 to 10 minutes and tell us 1 or 2 or 3 of the positive outcomes? Because until you guys cut me off, I was a scanner fanatic for about 2 years. So now I have to listen to fire. That's a whole nother thing. but you know, I've heard everything from the coaching, because I asked Casey about it, you know, and I've heard them say, you know, well, last time he did this, cigarettes and Diet Pepsi or something was the, you know, the solution. So I'm sure you guys have a couple that you anonymously tell people about, or not.
Oh,
Well,
sorry.
so Zach,
Nope.
if you want to go for it. But I have one that's not super flashy, but I think it's the epitome of the type of officers we have and the skills they have, and it'll be short. And then I'm sure Zach has an epic tale he can tell you from his recent experience. As he mentioned, I do sit at a desk frequently these days. I was kind of in a modified role to where I wasn't in a marked police car, but kind of was just hanging back on a call of a couple fights where, well, some of our officers were there, one of them an ECIT officer. So they didn't know I was there, but I was just there in case it went really bad. But it was two calls at once. They went to a call of someone screaming and yelling in the street that was trying to break into a business. And then as soon as they got there, they're like, oh, there's also a fight, like right over here, two people fighting, like super violent. So it was, ultra chaotic from the very beginning. And then they have two like very amped up people on two separate calls. So they have like 4 involved individuals. Everyone's excited. One of the people involved that was in the street is screaming and yelling and just won't calm down. And I watched one of our ECIT officers take her, walk her over to like an outdoor seating area, sit down with her. He sat across from her, talk to her, give her a cigarette. And I watched the level of her, escalation just like decrease significantly. He finished that. And then one of the other guys was giving one of their other officers a problem. And he had her wait there, went over and talked to this other guy who was really just amped up, not going with the program. He had him sit down on the curb, knelt down next to him, gave him a cigarette, and calmed him down. And so I watched this call go from, well, 2 calls, from just like over the top, amped up, out of control. And this one ECIT officer who's, obviously people have different talents. He's really talented, just in general. De-escalate 2 people completely separate within a span of like 5 minutes and take a call that was, on a lot of levels out of control and bring it to a place of like mostly calm and problem solving. And I know for a fact that happens constantly in the city. And I was lucky enough to be able to like sit back and watch. They didn't know I was watching. But to me, that's like the epitome of what our ACIT officers do all the time. And I was really proud to watch him do his thing.
How about you, Zach?
So I feel like I've been dropping all the moments I've already used already because I have a very terrible memory. I think it's just like day to day. Honestly, there are so many times that I come across folks that are in a crisis, or my favorite part is I'll go to a call with an officer, and as ECIT, we're not supposed to go there and just take over. Like, we're supposed to be there as supporting officers, like if they need help generally. But I still get every once in a while, there'll be officers like when I'll show up, they're like, go ahead. Go ahead. They're in a crisis. Deal with this. And that's not what we're supposed to do. But I think it's just, I always come back to it. It's, could that have used force? Yeah, absolutely. We could have used force on this. The person may have had a weapon. They may have had a knife, a gun in some form or fashion, or a fake gun. And knowing that, I was able to get out of that with nobody getting hurt. And those happen more often than not. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know they happen pretty frequently. And, Casey mentioned like how much force ECIT calls generate. Speaking from experience, generally the only time I ever have to use force, just off the top of my head, is I had to put someone in handcuffs because we had to put a mental health hold on them. Like we had to get this person to the hospital. And the only way to do that was to put them into handcuffs, and we had to struggle with them. Or it took multiple officers to help control this person because they were in such a crisis, either from mental health or drug induced, which is even worse. And we had to essentially pin this person to the ground. Unfortunately, in our standards, that's considered force. Like that's what we will even report on for force. The intention wasn't to hurt this person. It was merely to gain control of this person to get them to help. We try to avoid that if all possible, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And most of the time, those are the levels of force that I'll even have to use. That's, for me, that's my 1% of force generally. I'm able to avoid any kind of higher level. And when I can do that, I go home and I'm like, I didn't use force today. I didn't have to hurt anybody, and it worked. Especially people that are drug addicted. That's so much worse sometimes because it's so unpredictable and they're in such a different mindset. It's so much more dangerous. And not to downplay Chase, he said he works at a desk. I'll toot his horn a little bit. Chase is also on our CERT team, Special Emergency Response Team. All of us are part of like a specialty unit as well. So we've all kind of, developed our skills in these, kind of starting with ECIT and then going from there. We've developed our skills for communication and doing specialty units and things of that nature as well. Yeah, I don't know, Benson or Casey?
Yeah, I have an example from last week, maybe. Just kind of talking about how things kind of become seamless within our program as far as how we kind of scale up responses as needed. We had an incident on Wednesday last week where there was a stabbing in one of the apartment buildings downtown. And the suspect, the victim had been contacted by officers, and she was whisked away to the hospital to receive life-saving care. The suspect had retreated back into an apartment and was still armed with a knife. And as officers tried to make contact at the door, she charged the door and stabbed the door several times with the knife that she was armed with. Well, we had one of our ECIT officers that became the primary communicator on that call, and developed a line of communication with that suspect over the phone, and was on the phone with her for, I think, 45 minutes or even longer, as our negotiating team and our CERT team were en route to help bring this to a safe resolution. And so once CNT, the crisis negotiation team, got there, we utilized that ECIT officer to brief our negotiators as far as how the communication went, what was going well, what wasn't going well, and really helping make it a seamless transition to one of our negotiators. And so that happens fairly consistently as well, where they're utilizing their training as ECIT officers to best help resolve a situation if it does become such that it requires such a much bigger response. So, and I'm happy to report that one resulted in a safe resolution. The woman was negotiated out safely with no force being used, and safely resolved.
Amy, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I had a kind of a question for the group around, I thought you guys originally had 5 teams and now you're down to 3. Given the need of the community, do you think you would be better served with more teams than 3? Whoever.
My first question is, how did it get from 5 to 3?
Well, that's Barb's first question. Yeah,
Casey's
my
gonna be more
question
political
is-
than I am, so he can take this one.
This is it's a long story. So as you know, this has been an unprecedented year between COVID and then the civil unrest within Portland that lasted the whole summer pretty much. There were a lot of movements of patrol officers and patrol assets out of patrol functions to help support the nightly protests. And it kind of was a chain of events that happened. Our former CIT coordinator, Jim Stegemeyer, retired back in September, I believe. Chase Bryson, who's here, took his spot, which vacated one of our BHRT team's spots. It's ironic enough, Zach Nell was the officer we selected to come up to work in BHU. However, Central Precinct was down, I think 30 or 40 officers, so they didn't have the ability to let him release him to come work in BHU. Excuse me. So that left us with 4 officers at that time, and then due to the unprecedented nature of COVID and the impacts on city revenues, all city bureaus are having to take significant cuts going into the next fiscal year. And the police bureau is not obviously unscathed in that either. And we actually have some, we're underfunded as well already for this current fiscal year due to all of the overtime from the protests. And we've had significant numbers of people retire. So our patrol ranks have just been decimated as far as how many officers we have available. And so in order to ensure that we have enough officers to respond to 911 calls, there had to be some realigning. And as a result, we had another one of our officers is going to be transitioning back to the patrol ranks on early February. So we'll be going back to 3 teams, which is within the DOJ settlement agreement as the number of required teams. But if and when revenues change or funding changes, we could always do more. We found success, obviously, in having the structure that we did when we had the 5 teams. I don't doubt that we're not going to work just as hard, though, with the 3 teams that we have and continue to still serve people the best we can, though.
Right, but as a subcommittee, we're kind of going to be working on a recommendation to bring forward. And I would like to very much show that the benefit that has been achieved is worth the investment long term. So, you know, anything you can produce as far as like achieve goals or how many people's lives were saved by these programs, it's really important when you're seeking further funding to have a little bit of statistics on the pluses, you know, in the category. So that's what Behavioral Health Subcommittee like to work on, is trying to find a way to sequester more money for your operations, because I know it works.
Well, we appreciate the advocacy. If you have specific data points, we can talk offline and I can do my best to try to get you those data points that you would find helpful.
Yeah, we're going to try to form a work group to see. I would like more community involved in this conversation, because I was hoping a lot more folks would be here to learn about the benefits so we could sell it, so to speak, to the community more. But that'll come in time, so don't have to rush. I wanted to let you know that that's something we want to do out of this subcommittee, is to really let the public know the benefits of having what I call expanded I'll just say officer opportunities, you know, to have more officers at the scenes where it's needed. So thank you. That's just my take on it.
And just so everybody knows that it's being recorded, and we can post it on our YouTube. And so you will have it, Amy, to refer people to. So if they'll still be, with you guys being here, we still can get it out to further community members, whether they're here tonight or not.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
So
I want, sorry, not to interrupt, Barb, just maybe to clarify just a little bit. The ECIT program itself hasn't seen any reductions due to budget cuts or anything like that. So that's something that doesn't require extra money per se. It's the BHU co-responder teams that we have had a slight reduction in. So we're still planning on having a certification course for more ECIT officers this fall. So having those frontline ECIT officers, will still have those officers available moving forward.
You said co-responder teams, is that the right term?
Yeah, those are that's how we kind of describe our teams that work within BHU, our BHRT, behavioral health response teams, the officer and clinician.
Okay,
So that's where we had the reduction,
BHRT.
have a reduction in ECIT officers. So for the frontline folks that are going to be responding to the crisis events, being dispatched from our dispatch center, we have not had any reductions there.
So I don't know if that makes my question moot. Because I basically was also looking at, besides adding back the BHU, RT teams or whatever, I almost had it. I would be for recommending not reducing the ECIT training, and if there was money that could be shuffled around, not asking for more money per se, but that would be a really good place for it to be shuttled to if there's the capacity to do the training. And I know that that's part of it. I don't know if you were there, Casey, but at one of our forums, when we had the big forums after the George Floyd incident, there was one guy that said, well, why can't they all be ECIT trained? And, you know, and I understand why he would say that. So I guess it's like is it an either or can it be a both and? Does that make sense?
Well, kind of to answer that question, that's how we kind of got into the position we're in, because before, when we just had CIT officers, we had these specialized group of officers that were going to these mental health calls. And then when we went to a model where we trained all Portland officers in CIT training, you kind of lose it as being a specialty where you have people taking pride in that, or you have people that actually have a passion for that work. And so I would caution against making a recommendation to having everybody be ECIT, in the sense that you lose kind of control of the program, and having it be a specialized group of people that actually want to do the work. Our ECIT officers in Portland receive zero extra compensation. If anything, they have a lot more liability and a lot more stress added on them, and they don't get paid anymore. There's no fringe benefits per se. It's out of the kindness of their heart and the passion for the work that they're doing. So I would caution against making it something that we would have everybody do. And I know that that's not your, but if you end up having somebody asking that question, that would be my answer to them. So yeah.
I had an answer too. I think I got to just let it go, but yeah.
Jared, you have your hands up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to chime in. That's an unfortunate side effect of the settlement agreement, is that it does mandate that the ECIT program be a volunteer sort of opt-in with a less than 100%, and ideally a third or a fourth. And I think that's the Bureau is at about a third of its patrol officers. So technically it's a requirement of the settlement agreement that it be a voluntary program. So making it mandatory wouldn't be possible for the Bureau or the city, at least during the pendency of the settlement agreement. And I know reasonable minds can disagree on that, but our expert advises that, for all the reasons Lieutenant Hetman just mentioned, that there's a lot of value to it being a volunteer opt-in program, a specialty, so to speak, so that you get the officers who are really best suited for that work to be directly dispatched to those highest risk calls involving a mental health component.
Well, the voluntary part, and the fact that they volunteer for it and that they're heavily vetted, I mean, definitely it's a different unit.
So Amy, I just want to give a time heads up. It's 7:45. On the agenda, we talked about having some discussion. Did you want to talk about some next steps for developing a recommendation before the meeting's over tonight? Do you want to wait till?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, totally yet. We don't have a lot of folks here to, I guess, for others, unless there's anyone else who wants to speak up. But now that I understand it better, now it makes more sense between the BHRT and the regular ECIT officers. So I'll have to really think this through between that and the training itself. Oh, the other question I had is, who do you get to do de-escalation training from? Like, what courseware do you use?
I can probably take that. I help facilitate. We work with Dr. Lisbeth Gerritsen, which I don't know if you guys have had the privilege of meeting her at any point, but between her and I mean, the curriculum's kind of already been written. We've kind of take from like some of the PERF curriculum, the police executive, and now I'm going to mess it up that I'm on the spot, review forum. Is that it? Research, dang it.
Yeah.
So we take some from that, but we use one of our psychiatric nurse that worked at Project Respond for many years as a crisis responder. She helps teach a lot of the signs and symptoms. The more technical, obviously I'm not qualified to teach signs and symptoms and the inner workings of the human brain. So she teaches that. And then we kind of come up with the curriculum, which obviously goes through the vetting. Once we come up with a lesson plan, it'll go through chain of command. It'll go through the BHU AC, who's the other citizen review side. So we don't necessarily use a curriculum. And then it's there's NAMI comes in and helps teach at our ECIT or like consumer panels, come in. And so it's kind of a mesh of a lot of different people. We bring in Multnomah County helps teach some of it.
So you could say you have quite a bit of lived experience speaking through your curriculum kind of thing. Because if you're talking about folks and their expertise and their knowledge, that's what I, consider lived experience, which is really important to have because you have a lot of different viewpoints. And the other is the actual curriculum that other people write that are specific for de-escalation techniques. So
yeah,
I've been attending trainings, so I'm getting the hang of this.
Yeah, we have like a family consumer panel generally, and then a consumer or peer consumer panel where they can speak. And then de-escalation, we obviously work really closely with our patrol procedures instructors who are officers at the training division who kind of help. And I'm also a patrol procedures instructor, but I'm not a lead patrol procedure. So we work with them when we're talking like de-escalation tactics. That kind of, when we're talking mental health crisis and de-escalation, it obviously fits in both worlds a little bit, like it's in our mental health BHUE world and then also in the patrol tactics side. And so we work closely with them. I go out to almost every scenario day that has any mental health crisis scenarios and help debrief or role play or do a lot of those things. And so it's lived experience in the sense of like you take what we've learned on the street and from lots of time and extra training and try to apply that to get the best outcome for the person and the community.
And if I can hop in, and then also there's a lot of crisis communication that we talk with. And so there's instructors out there. We had this, Zach mentioned in service that the ECIT officers went to, so like a refresher. And we had 3 hours of crisis communication skills taught by our retired hostage negotiator from the Bureau. And so basically what they're talking about is looking through themes of looking through kind of what's traveling through there, right? And so that's kind of
Mhm.
that specific training that we'll get throughout the initial and then also throughout the officer's career of refining his or her craft.
Excellent.
If I can, just because it hasn't been mentioned yet, but I think there's been a couple times where it's applicable, is part of our training. Generally we're not rushing to make any decision on any call. There's certain calls where you just have to, unfortunately, you're forced
Mhm.
with making a quick decision to stop something bad from happening. But generally, we have a little bit of time, which is like kind of the culture we're trying to build and reinforce with everyone from our advanced academy all the way through our ECIT courses of planning, being thoughtful, making decisions. But one of the tactics, which is a de-escalation tactic that we talk about a lot, is disengagement. So, is this something that we need to stay here and push today? Is this something we need to deal with right now? Or is it safer and better for everyone if we go away and we don't just, I tell all of our students, we don't just drop the mic and like walk away and, oh, okay, that was nice. That would have been a hard call. We have to make a plan. We work with providers or whatever that might be. And that's where BHU sometimes comes in to help with the follow-up piece. So yeah, we just hadn't talked about disengagement at all, but I think that's a huge part when you ask about de-escalation. Officers on the street use that all the time. I think it's an incredibly appropriate tactic. There are sometimes where we can't disengage for a lot of reasons, but risk to third parties is the biggest. If someone else is in danger, we obviously can't just leave them. But it's a big tactic. We're not pushing things just to finish a call. We're taking our time, and if it's the right choice is to walk away and come back at a later day or try a different tactic, that's what we do. And that's how we train.
Amy, thank you. Chase, Amy, I was wondering if we wanted to just do a call out to Rochelle and Trudy as our community members that are present. If you have any questions before the meeting's over.
Great idea.
Not to put you on the spot, but wanted to create the space in case you did.
Is there anybody else in the room who would like to ask more questions before we adjourn for this evening? Nope.
Rochelle says no questions from her, and Trudy said thanks. She really appreciates all the information.
Okay. Well then, I guess, given in the spirit of the evening and time, we should probably say thank you. And we meet every month. You're welcome to come back and listen in and be a voice. We're always looking for folks who work on the streets, who work in the offices. We want to build those relationships. So y'all got to keep coming back. I appreciate it. Even if you didn't say anything, just being here helps us know that you're in the room. So as support. So that's all I have. Any last words from anyone?
Yeah, actually, if nobody else does, I've got some, which is that you guys are the guys that could probably help the other officers have some empathy and understand what it's like to be the person being handcuffed, or not worse than that, but my best example is there were cop cars all up and down our street with the lights and the everything, and they'd already got the guy, but they still had the lights and the everything. And as I went over to talk to the sergeant to get his card to give to our community person, and just standing there trying to talk to him next to all these cars with the lights and stuff, that totally made my adrenaline go up. And I know I didn't do anything wrong, So there's some of that, and some also PTSD things that I would really love to get added to some of the repertoire of understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for everything.
Trudy added a parting thought. She said, I'm interested in knowing more in the future about the issues raised about how PCCEP and others can get the word out about the ECIT and avoiding the perception of propaganda. So, Amy, maybe that's one of the things we could put on a future agenda item.
Absolutely.
talking about how to really build the relationships with this unit and the community and make sure you understand the good work you do.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that virus kind of got in our way.
It's not quite out of the way yet. Everybody be safe, be well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet everyone.